Are you a commercial bread producer, or you are looking to starting a bakery, either a mini bakery or a larger bakery of your own, or even you are making bread at home? These tips I'm going to tip out here are going to help you to excel in your bread business. So relax and enjoy this video to the end. 1. Flour type. Note that the type of flour that you use in your bread production can affect the quality, the quantity, and the texture of your bread. So, whenever you want to buy flour for your bread production, go for the hard flour, those flour that can absorb more moisture and also give you good yield. Number 2, water source. The type of water that you use in producing your bread matters a lot. Some persons use cold water, room temperature water, warm water, lukewarm water. So this type of water affects the quality of your bread. If you are going for a commercial bread production, either cold water or room temperature or normal water is advisable. This is because warm water or lukewarm water is going to increase the reactivity of your yeast, thereby making your bread to proof or rise quickly, and such bread can easily collapse, and once that is done, you're not going to like the outcome. Also, such breads can easily have an aftertaste due to the overreactivity of the yeast. When you use cold water or normal temperature water, there is everything they see for your bread dough to double in size, thereby increasing your production and also improving the texture and the strength of your dough and the resulting bread. 3. Yeast type. Also note that the type and the quantity of yeast that you use in your bread production can affect the taste of your bread, the proving time, and the texture of your bread. So whenever you want to make your bread, note this type of yeast. There are two different types of yeast, basically: the wet or the block yeast or the fresh yeast, and the dry yeast. Also, there are two types of dry yeast: the instant dry yeast and the active dry yeast. So whenever you are using the fresh yeast or the wet yeast, the quantity you are going to use is just like double of the instant dry yeast or the dry yeast. So whenever you have a recipe that calls for 3 grams of the dry yeast and what you have is the fresh yeast, you will be needing 6 grams of this fresh yeast. Okay, now for this dry yeast and this wet yeast, the dry yeast will react faster, but the wet yeast normally takes time. That is why most companies that produces pizza always use the wet yeast, because it takes time to proof. Also, between the active dry yeast and the instant dry yeast, the active dry yeast requires you to proof the yeast before using it, whereby the instant dry yeast doesn't require you to proof the yeast before using it. So for the instant dry yeast, you can easily add the yeast into your mixture and then go ahead and make your bread, whereby the active dry yeast you are required to proof or bloom the yeast first, either with warm water or lukewarm water, before adding it into the mixture. So if you're making your bread, to me, I will advise you go for instant dry yeast, which you can just add directly into your mixture, because instant dry yeast also activates faster than the active dry yeast. So although the timing space is not that much. Note also that bread made with dry yeast lasts longer and tastes better than bread made with fresh yeast or the wet yeast. Number 4, the temperature and the humidity during proofing of your dough or of your bread. Now note that bread proving, or the proving of bread, or the fermentation process in bread, is faster when the temperature is warm or is kind of high. So when you are proving, or when you want to prove your bread, ensure that the environment is warm, okay, so that the proving time will be shortened. But during harmattan or cold seasons, it always takes a lot of time for the bread to prove, unless you have a prover. Yes, you have a bread prover. So most commercial companies have bread proofer. You can also make a local bread proofer where you can put your bread so that your bread can proof, or your dough can proof faster for you to bake. Simply put, low temperatures and high humidity affects the proving time of the bread, thereby lowering the proving time of the bread, whereby high temperatures or medium temperatures and low humidity will help your bread to prove faster. Number 5, oven type. The type of oven, ranging from the local oven to the rotary oven to the convection and non-convection oven and to the rack oven, can affect the outcome of your bread or the resultant bread. Although each of these ovens can give you the type of bread that you want, but if you do not know how to operate them, that is where the challenge comes in. So, whichever oven type that you want to use, learn about the oven, understand the temperature controls and how to set the oven so well, so that you can have a better bread at the end. At number 6, we have inadequate or adequate fat in your dough. So, whether you are using butter or margarine or vegetable oil or vegetable shortening, ensure you use them in the right amount or the adequate proportion. This is because too much fat in your dough can give you a bread that is so soft and dense, and less of fat, or when you don't add adequate fat in your dough, the resulting bread is going to look kind of dry and crumbly. So know your recipe and use the adequate amount of fat that is required to give you a better bread. At number 7, we have oven temperature. Your oven temperature is one basic thing you should never joke with, because this has a very greater influence over the resulting bread. So if your oven doesn't have a temperature control panel, just get for yourself this particular oven thermometer so you can use it to control the temperature of your baking. Every type of oven has its own temperature range for baking bread. So you need to understand the temperature range of the particular oven that you are using or that you use, so you can bake your bread to the best of your advantage. Nevertheless, breads baked at the temperatures between 180 degrees C to 230 degrees C tends to come out soft and fine. So just monitor or understand the temperature of your oven so that you can bake the best bread ever. More so, don't forget that it is a must, it is a sine qua non to always preheat your oven before baking. Make sure that you preheat your oven every time before putting in your bread to bake in the oven. Number 8, baking time. How long you allow your bread to be or to stay in your oven or to bake in the oven also affects the resultant bread. Okay, bread that are baked at a longer time may turn out with a hard crust and also even get burnt. But bread that you bake at the actual time will turn out brown in the normal range and also come out soft. But if you bake the bread at a timing lower than normal, it's going to come out kind of white, and you may not like the bread because it may taste underbaked or undercooked. Note also that the temperature of the oven or the baking temperature and timing works hand in hand. So the higher the temperature, the lower the timing, and the lower the temperature, the higher the timing. 9. Kneading your dough. How well you knead your dough matters a lot, because you need your dough to have this gluten formation at least to pass the window panes test. So whether you are using your hands or you are using a machine to knead your dough, ensure that you knead your dough thoroughly. Use the right type of flour and make sure that your ingredients are in their right proportion. Give your dough enough time to mix, and if you are using your hands, you have to knead thoroughly. If you are using a machine, you have to also knead thoroughly. Give it time to knead thoroughly so that gluten will be formed. Your dough must have to be stretchy and have that window panes test when you stretch it. This will give you a better bread with a good texture, and also it will also allow your bread to have a good yield. Next is your salt and the sugar balance. So when you are making a bread, you have to be very careful in addition of your salt and the sugar. When you make a bread dough with just sugar without salt, such bread may not taste that good, and it will also prove too fast, thereby affecting its texture and its appeal to taste. On the other hand, when you make a bread with salt without sugar, such bread will take time to prove, but it will have a better taste than when you make that bread with just sugar, though it will take time to brown, because sugar also helps in browning of bread. So when there is only salt, it takes a lot of time for that bread to brown, and it takes a lot of time for that bread to prove as well. Sometimes when kneading dough that has just salt, such dough finds it difficult to develop gluten. They can easily become too sticky and may not easily bind or form gluten. So when you need a quality bread with a better taste and texture, or with a better outcome, try to balance the quantity of the sugar and salt you use, so that the reactivity of the yeast won't be affected. The sugar should be a little way higher than the salt, but they should be in balanced proportion. This is because the yeast eats the sugar to grow or to ferment, while the salt helps to retard or to reduce the fermentation process and helps to bind the dough together. Next is the use of eggs and milk in bread production. Although in most recipes you can eliminate milk and egg, especially when you are making the authentic Nigerian agege bread, you don't need the addition of egg and milk. Even at that, such bread will come out very good and perfect in taste. Use of milk powder or liquid milk in the bread adds more protein, more sweetness, and more tenderness to the dough, resulting in a very rich bread. Although you need to be also careful while adding this milk, or the milk powder or the liquid milk. You have to be very careful while adding it. So if you are to use the liquid milk, then you have to reduce the quantity of water that you'll be using in your mixture. That is why I prefer the use of milk powder, because it doesn't alter the quantity of the water that you need in mixing your dough. As for the eggs serve as emulsifiers in bread production. They also add to the protein content of the bread and also helps to tenderize the bread as well. Just as too much of milk is bad in bread production, also too much of egg is bad. So such breads with too much of egg will turn out dense and will taste so eggy and will take long to proof. Number next is dough in the pan and dough proving. So you have to be sure you add the right amount of dough in the right pan. Each pan size has the exact amount of dough it should contain. So if you put too much of a particular dough in a particular pan that is not supposed to be, it's going to affect the size or the proving quality of that bread. So the dough has to be given enough time to prove and the right time as well. So here you can see when your bread is normally at the normal proving time or has proven in the right way, and when it is underproved and when it's overproved. So when you are making your bread, be very conscious of the type of pan or the size of pan you use for a particular bread type. Summarily, use the right amount of dough in the right pan and also give it time to prove at the right time. As for the bread pan with lid, once the bread has proven to 1/4 of the size of the pan, then you have to bake the bread. This is to allow the bread to prove or increase more within the pan. Don't allow the bread to overproof and pop out of the pan size before you start baking it. So once it is 1/4 of the size of the pan, then you can bake. The last but not the least, clean bread production materials and environment. So ensure that your bread materials like your bread pans, every other thing, your bread machines, everything you want to use in your baking is as clean as possible, and also ensure that your environment is neat. Cleanliness is next to godliness. The more cleaner your environment and your materials are, the more special, more quality your bread will be, and your bread will last longer. Aside the use of some preservatives in bread, a clean environment and material will ensure that your bread lasts longer and have good quality. Therefore, with all these tips put together, I assure you you're going to have the best commercial bread production line. And if you also want more coaching, you also want to learn more about bread production so that you start making your own bread, I am always available. You can hit me up on the number that you see on the screen, or you can just message me with the link I'll be dropping in the description section. See you guys next time. Bye.